The Honourable Shane Mallard.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. If I'd known I was coming into this chamber, elected this chamber, to be lectured and hectored by the Greens, I may well have thought twice, because I know that the Wallara Council was relieved when the Honourable David Shoebridge was elected to the chamber and left that council, because he left a legacy. A tree legacy of Wallara Council of copper nails into fig trees, which proliferated under the Greens' influence at Wallara Council. So don't lecture this chamber about trees. Now, you should be. I would like to see a chamber, and so would the community like to see a chamber that acknowledged people who are working together to improve legislation, which I thought that was what this was about. Clearly, there has been an example where legislation responding to a human tragedy that occurred in the Blue Mountains, potentially elsewhere in this state, clearly responding to that legislation, supported by both parties. Clearly, there have been some individuals in our society who have exploited loopholes in that legislation. It happens all around the world. And it's good that the government, it's good that the government has come to the chamber with amendments that tighten up those loopholes. Now, I wasn't even in the parliament when that legislation was passed, nor was my colleague. I acknowledge that interjection there. Happy days, he says. Well, I'm here for a while now, so get used to it. My colleague Scott Farlow, so it was Scott McDonald indeed, but Scott Farlow also wasn't here. But we are here today because we are aware of the issues that were raised by the community, not even being in this chamber, aware of those issues around the exploitation of loopholes in the legislation. The vast majority of responses to the legislation clearly were in the right intent, and I'm sure the government and the minister responsible has acknowledged that. There has been some clearing that has protected lives and property, and I understand that the big issue here is leaf litter and the build-up of fuel for fires, and that's been the issue for this policy. Now, I acknowledge the. I'm not going to acknowledge your interjections, and I just try to ignore you. I know. I'm happy to.
Point of order, Mr Deputy President.
Point of order, the Honourable Penny Sharp.
I'm about to acknowledge you, Penny Sharp.
This is actually getting way out of hand. There is way too much interruption from all sides of the chamber. We've got quite a lot of legislation to get through tonight. I'd ask that you ask the rest of the chamber to be quiet and listen in silence to this member's contribution.
Thank you. I will note that I've been a bit tolerant of the debate, given a bit of banter in the chamber, but if we can cease that now and that the member be heard in silence, I will be a bit more stern from here in.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. And we were aware that there are community organisations and committee members very alarmed in urban areas, particularly the North Shore. I'll give a good example, and the campaign called Stop the Chop, who are concerned around the loopholes being exploited by people who, in my view, were not acting in the goodwill of the Parliament when it passed this legislation. And we've heard examples of this from other members. I believe these amendments and the regulations that will go with that will go a long way to addressing those concerns. The 100 metres from the waterline proposal, I think, in my view, will certainly reduce the exploitation in regards to removing trees to protect views. But I think one of the fundamental things I'm very pleased to see these amendments address is the reinstatement of the superiority of the council development application conditions. I am aware of trees, significant trees and developments that were across those areas that are fire vulnerable, that were a condition of consent to be protected and retained, that once the law came in were removed. Whether that was to improve views or to improve the value of the property, or, as I was saying earlier, potentially just to make it. Some people have an issue around trees and dropping leaves and branches, but nonetheless, now the applicants need to go back to the council if they want to remove a tree, whether it's become unsafe over time. So go back to the council, and if they don't like the council's decision, they need to go to the Land and Environment Court. So I'm pleased to see that put it back in place. Just in general, Mr Acting President, Deputy President, I lament the attitude of Sydney-siders to trees. I do. My folks, as you know, are on a farm in Dubbo, and they cherish their trees. and farmers have developed a great understanding of trees and farmlands, much more in the last 50 years in terms of erosion and protecting stock and so forth. But I lament the attitude of urban Sydney-siders to trees. I grew up in Western Sydney, and there wasn't a big tree to be seen, all removed by the developers, and the council came along and planted small, timid shrubs not to offend the electricity providers. And I would like to see the Sydney-siders embrace more greatly their urban canopy, and that's part of my contribution to the City of Sydney was the establishment of the canapes. You'd be pleased to hear this, Honourable Peter Phelps, that I established the Significant and Heritage Tree Register at the City of Sydney to protect heritage and significant trees.
I love heritage.
Indeed, and that's a legacy I have there. But we are custodians of our environment, urban or rural, and trees are a fundamental part of that. And I don't think anyone supports legislation that allows vandalism, as opposed to the intent of the original legislation, which was to protect life, to remove trees. And I just end on my favourite Chinese proverb, Mr. Deputy President, which is the Chinese proverb is the best time to plant a tree is 50 years ago, and the second best time is today. And I encourage members to do that.